You are now listening to the Minority Trailblazer podcast. Let the story begin.
One time for the lovers, 2 times for the ladies, 3 times for the brothers, 4 times for the babies. Do you love her? 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 1 time for the lovers, 2 times for the ladies, 3 times for the brothers, 4 times for the babies. Do you love her? 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 Brown skin, love her brown skin, love her brown. Brown skin, love her brown skin, love her brown. She my brown skin, love her brown skin, love her brown. She my brown skin, love her brown skin. Hold me down.
Welcome to the Minority Trailblazer podcast, and I'm your host, Greg Eel, the culture change agent. On this show, we interview young, successful minorities in a variety of fields to educate, empower, and inspire our current and future generation of leaders. And today's show, one for the ages. One for the ages. Let me say it again. One for the ages. We breaking new ground on this thing. And my man jumps on the podcast and drops some jewels, nuggets, and all that good stuff. So if you've been waiting on a heat rock, well, shoot, last week was a heat rock. Shoot, the week before that was a heat rock. Shoot, this whole season 5 has been a heat rock. But today I got something for you. Side note, and I need everybody to listen to clearly. So if you're in your car, turn your radio down. I can't say turn your radio down. You listen to me if you do that. But when you're in your car, turn it up a little bit. If you're running, stop running. Stop running. You're working out, stop working out. I need you to do one thing only. Yo, y'all gotta leave a review, yo. I looked at the reviews on iTunes for a second. So if you're an iPhone owner or listening via iTunes, yo, immediately, if you haven't left a review already, and this is your first or second episode, please do me a favor. Leave a review. We had like 220, which I'm grateful for. But we got almost 1 million freaking downloads. Wait, what's going on? Nah. Go ahead and leave that 5-star boy. Right now, they done made the process mad easy. It's just like a couple clicks away. So open it up, leave a review. If you don't know how to leave a review, contact me, look at Google, do something. But if you are listening to this podcast and this is more than your first time listening and you haven't left a review and you got an iPhone, shame on you. Shame on you. But that's it for that, man. But my last housekeeping thing before I begin is I have put out there on LinkedIn, and I'm going to put it on a couple other social media platforms, a link to a survey. It's like 4 questions. I just want to get to know this audience a little bit more, make sure that I'm addressing all your needs, and I want to know more people and more topics and more things to discuss, as well as potential other offerings that I can cook up together with the people that's been on the podcast, man. So if you're on LinkedIn, make sure that you fill out the survey, or you can just go to gregehill.com and put your email address in, and you could be on the email list so we can keep you up to date with everything that's going on in the Minority Trailblazer world and my world, to keep you empowered, motivated, and just continue to share the good news. Do I got something I want to share before we jump into the podcast? I do. Quick update, quick life update. Man, the feedback, I was on LinkedIn for the first time in like 10 months, and the feedback has been phenomenal. Thank you so much. I'm not going to name names on this podcast, maybe in a future podcast, but so many people have reached out and shared their well wishes and excited to have the podcast back. Some people ask about the car. No, I have not. I don't have a car yet. I was in an accident. Car got totaled. We're working through those things. It's just a lot, man. It's a lot. But working through those things, and I ain't gonna stress it. I'm not stressing. I'm gonna make the most of the situation while we're Ubering up, while we're lifting up, while we're relying on others, my good brothers to hold me down. Shout out to T Crump and all my other people that's held me down with rides, man, and is getting through the situation, because it's not even a money issue at this point. It's just about having people honor what they say they're going to honor. And I guess I'll give you a little bit of it. It's crazy we're having a lawyer come on this podcast, but I had a lawyer 2 years ago. I had a driving while license revoked. It was because some unpaid tickets. And I didn't have the money at the time, so I got the DWLR. So when I had the money, I hired a lawyer to do his thing, talk to the DA, get it knocked down. Paid him $700, and he said he got me. 1 month go by. Oh, he got me. He pushed it back. So well over a year occurred, and he had pushed back the dates. And he said, okay, yeah, we entered a plea, and everything's good to go. So once I got my license back and applying for a car, got my first car, my insurance was like $240, and I was like, all right, that's I'm not rocking with it, but I'll pay it because I need a car. They ended up dropping my insurance, my full coverage, and then raising it all the way up to $600. So I was like, nah, we can't work like that. So, and it's crazy. All this happened right before the car accident. So it's crazy I dodged that bullet. Luckily, I wasn't at fault. Nobody was hurt. But now that I'm getting another car, my insurance quotes are $600 plus. And I'm like, that's crazy. So now I realize after my due diligence that the lawyer had pled guilty. And I was like, dude, I didn't have to pay $700 for you to plead guilty, dude. I could have pled guilty myself. I could have got that bread back. And I had 300 court calls. So we're in the process of getting all this stuff. So please keep me in prayers with that. And also, too, I want to tell y'all one thing before we begin. Actually, no, I'm going to save that for next episode because I just want to jump into this podcast. It's a phenomenal podcast, and it's an hour and 20 minutes. So, guys, it ain't 2 hours. You got this time. And thank you again, loyal listeners, loyal supporter for supporting the Minority Trailblazer movement. I do not take any of this for granted. It's been 3 years in the making. Not 3 years in the making. 3 years in the running we've been going. And y'all been supporting us since day one. So love y'all. Got some more fire episodes. But definitely tune in closely because my man Seth is about to drop some bombs on this. All right. So thank y'all again. Enjoy the show. And today I guarantee I got a show for you. I'm interviewing somebody that I don't know when I met him. I don't know. I really can't even be sure when I met him. But ever since kind of like hearing his story, seeing it online, and also seeing his weight transformation and just what he has done, not only as far as personal development, as far as weight loss, as far as what he's doing now in the law community. I mean, I think he's just a very encouraging person. One, he's the only lawyer that only lawyer I think we ever had on the Minority Trailblazer podcast. So all these episodes, I got to do better. And also, two, one of the only members of the LGBTQ community that we had on the podcast. So I am just beyond excited. Not only have some great conversation, but to have some conversation that we typically, two black males, would never have on a podcast in relation to some things, man. So I'm going to read a snippet of his bio and then we're just going to jump right into the show. So he is an associate and business lawyer for Foley and Lardner LLP. He is a member of the firm's private equity and venture capital practice. He was a summer associated with Foley in 2015. Prior to joining Foley, he was a graduate research assistant for a Duke Law associate professor, where he conducted research regarding the racialized background of private equity markets in the United States. Before entering law school, he was a financial professional with a broad range of experience in quantitative and statistical analysis, budgeting, accounting, and forecasting. He held various positions which included working as a business analyst for AkzoNobel, interning as a sector analyst with Decatur Capital, and interning with Crawford & Company in their finance department. He also interned with the executive office of the president at the White House as an operations intern, where he assisted in staff in overseeing presidential appointments and assisted with system audits, training, and reporting. He earned his law degree from Duke University School of Law, JD 2016, where he's a research assistant for Duke's Nicholas Institute for Environmental Policy Solutions. During his time at Duke, he served as the president of the Black Graduate and Professional Student Association, president of Outlaw, which was an LGBTQ law student association, and treasurer of the Duke University Hurston James Society. He completed his undergraduate degree at Georgia State University in 2011 with a major in finance. And he was most recently awarded 40 Under 40 for LGBTQ Business Leaders of America, Best Lawyers Under 40 in the country by LGBTQ Bar Association. And he was just a recent recipient during Black History Month of an Icon Award by GLAAD. So without further ado, as you can tell, I'm excited. I'm pumped up. I would like to introduce Seth Pearson to the Minority Trailblazer podcast. Welcome to the show.
Appreciate it, G. I should get you to like introduce me every time I speak someplace.
Hey man, just give me the call and I got you, man. Just give me the call and I got you, man.
Very glad to be with you. Very glad to be talking to you today. I'm excited too.
No doubt, man. No doubt, man. So as we always do, before we get into the show, talk about the past, present, future, and all that good stuff, I like to start the show off with a quote. So Seth, if you can share with us a quote or a mantra that you live by and give us a story about how you apply that quote or mantra in your everyday life.
Sure. So probably the thing, I realized at some point that almost all the issues that I had in my life were of my own making.
Mm-hmm.
And at some point I had to stop waiting to be rescued and start slaying my own dragons because nobody was coming. And if I did it, I was just going to be there for the rest of my life waiting on somebody to come and get me. So I always say, like, you got to start slaying your own dragons and get yourself out of the situation that you created for yourself. And I really try to play that thing out in my own life. It's been tough, but you have to tell yourself some really hard truths. Some of my story is that I flunked out of college twice. I was arrested several times. I was homeless in Atlanta at one point. There was just so much wrong with my life. And I got to a place where I was like, you know what? I got to free myself. And I told God, if you just give me a shot, I'm going to change everything. I'm going to start working hard to fix all the things that I've broken. And I've tried to do that in my life. And it's kind of how I got here.
Man. You already said a podcast full of stuff already, man. We can just go ahead and pack this thing up, man. Like this is because I mean, you look online and you see the awards that you've received. You see the schools that you went to. You see the path that you are online now. Even if you just look at, not even talking about websites, let's just look at Facebook. And it's like, man, this is one of the most encouraging and funny guys. Like you're encouraging, but you say some funny stuff too. Like, but it's like, you don't see that. And that's why I love having this podcast, because so many times we walk by people in everyday life. We come in contact with people and we see what they're doing now and we're encouraged, but there's so much more to that story. So on that note, our first part of the podcast, we always try to take everybody back to the past. And I don't like to always go to the past, because sometimes when I look about my past, I'm like, I don't even want to talk about that. Like, we passed that. But I think it's very important for our audience members to kind of build that commonality and see where we came from, because I think that's the genesis of kind of what makes you who you are today. So, man, if you could share with our audience a little bit about your background and who you are before you kind of made the changes and started slaying those dragons.
Yeah, absolutely. So I've always been very transparent about my story. I think a lot of people will look at where I am today. It's like, oh, Seth, you're a corporate attorney, you're a Duke Law graduate. You don't have, they think that it's always been this way, and it very much was not this way. So I graduated from high school in 1996.
Wow.
And went to Tuskegee University. It was the only university I ever wanted to go to. For some reason, I thought that I was going to leave Syracuse, New York, and go to Tuskegee, Alabama, and be my whole gay self, and they were going to love me.
Uh-huh.
And they did not love me. It was a really rough situation. And I call that time in my life screaming at trees, because I had so in front of Bethune, where I stayed, the dorm I stayed on campus, there were a lot of trees out in front. And when you would walk to the cafeteria, you'd have to walk past the dorms, and they could see you, but you couldn't see them.
Mm-hmm.
And so they would yell things at me from the window, faggot, get out of here, gay boy, because I came to campus and I decided that I was going to be out. Mm-hmm. And so I would just stand there and scream at the trees, because I was from New York, so I was like, I'm not no punk. You're about to just punk me.
Mm-hmm.
So,
and you ain't no small dude either.
Exactly. I was no little, and that's what I'm saying. Like, they never would say anything to my face because I was a little too big for that. But they would definitely do things anonymously. They would spray paint fag on my door. They would call all night long. So I had to take the phone off the hook, and eventually it got to where I wouldn't even leave the room. And it was really, really depressing. Stopped going to class, stopped doing anything, and eventually I flunked out of school. Had my dad come and pick me up, and I went back home and I started working at JCPenney's. And it was really made a lot of poor choices. Went back to school at the University of Buffalo. Had a much better experience there. Also decided to just be out, and people were a lot more accepting there. But I was trying to be a chemical engineer. And so I had like a 3.89 average outside of my major. And in my major, I had like a 1.7 because I failed every engineering class I took, every single one. And so my advisor was like, Seth, you've got to stop trying to do this. Like, you are like crapping and backing up in it. So you got to make some different changes. And I just wouldn't, because that's what mommy wanted me to do. You know, you do what mommy tells you to do. So I ended up flunking out of school again. And this time, I was kind of done. I eventually became a youth director for United Methodist Church. And I started working in the Buffalo City School District, teaching a nonprofit curriculum in a school called Riverside for kids who were skippers and drug dealers and disconnected kids. And I was working at the Boys and Girls Club at night. So I was working, 80 hours a week, just making $30,000 a year maybe. Just trying to make things work. And eventually I got to the point where I realized I could do this for the rest of my life. But I was encouraging these kids to go to school, and their education is important. And I had not finished my degree. So I decided that I was going to up and move to Atlanta.
Wow.
And so I moved to Atlanta because I heard about a Hope Scholarship. And if you were a resident of Georgia for a year, then they would pay for your school. And so I went there, and I was like, that's what I'm going to do. I had a friend who I'd gone to Tuskegee with who lived there.
And how old were you at this time?
I was like 27 by this. And got to Atlanta. Things didn't work out. Couldn't find a job. Ended up homeless, living in my car. I gotten several tickets, speeding tickets, and all kinds of stuff around the country driving around. So I had a suspended license. My registration was suspended. No insurance on the car. Inspection was expired. For I think 389 days, I was just riding dirty until they finally got me and arrested me and put me in jail. That happened, I think, 3 times.
3 times?
Yeah, 3 times. And I would say that it was like debtor's prison. Like, I couldn't pay the ticket. So
we can have a conversation all day about that. That's how the system is really crazy when it comes to those parking tickets.
Absolutely, especially for black brown folks. That's what affects more than anybody else. So, eventually I always say, like, I was 28 years old. I'd thrown myself a birthday party that nobody showed up to. I was sitting on the bar, soaking wet because I had gotten caught in the rain, and I had missed, and I had to take the bus there, and I got off on the wrong stop. So I'm sitting at this bar drunk. I called my mother and told her that Jesus turned water into vodka and cranberry, and she told me I was a heathen. And it was my rock bottom. And I sat there and I said, Lord, I am not going to die like this. I cannot do this for the rest of my life. And I said, if you just give me a second, if you just help me, I can fix it. And I said, I can't do everything, but I can do something. And I'm going to work every single day from this point to make things better. And, at the time, I was like 540 pounds. I mean, things were really, really tough.
You were 540 pounds? You got up to that, Seth?
At my biggest, I was 540 pounds. The biggest person people had ever met in real life.
Wow.
It wasn't on television. And things were just terrible. I remember being in my van and looking for a ketchup packet on the floor, because if I could just find some ketchup, I could eat. Because I was so hungry. And things had just gotten terrible. And so but after that birthday, I just started working every single day. I couldn't pay all the tickets, but I could pay one ticket at a time. I got another job. I got a job at United Healthcare working in a call center. And I got a job working at a command center, a 24-hour command center. So I would work 8 to 5. And then on Fridays after 5, I would go to the command center and I'd work 6 to midnight, and I would come back. I worked 16 hours on Saturday and 16 hours on Sunday.
Mm-hmm.
And I did that for almost 2 years. I could rehabilitate my loans because my student loans were all in default. So I took that year. I rehabilitated my student loans. I got that back. I got into Georgia Perimeter, and I became a business major, and I got straight A's my first semester. So
Wow.
I finally was doing the thing the right way. Finished at Georgia Perimeter. I transferred to Georgia State. I graduated from there with honors. Went on to law school at Duke.
Hold up. Let's stop right there, because that there's three critical things that I want to ask you before we even get to the law school portion, right?
Sure. One
of the first key things that I would like to ask is in reference to I know when you first went to college at Tuskegee, you just chose to be out. At what age did you kind of realize that you were in fact gay? Like what age was that, and how was that in your household? How was that relation?
So interesting. So it's interesting. When I did get to law school, I wrote about this in my as my diversity essay. I grew up in a very, very Christian household.
Mm-hmm.
We were Church of God in Christ. My mother was Church of God in Christ. You can't join it. You got to be born in. And then my dad was Baptist. And so it was really, you could be a lot of things.
Mm-hmm.
Gay was not one of them.
Mm-hmm.
And so it was, it was just holiness or hell. And so I grew up in an environment that was incredibly loving. My family was incredibly loving, but they absolutely had no tolerance for anything associated with LGBTQ, and we lived in a different time. But I think I was 16. I was 16 years old, and I remember describing it to a friend of mine. We were up on the football field. A girl named Alana Weissman Ward. She was actually my principal's daughter. And I told her, I said, I feel like I have a parasite in me. I feel like there's something that's taking over me, and I couldn't stop it. I would do everything I could. Like I would electrocute myself. I would stick myself with pins when I would think about guys in a sexual way. Anything I could do to not be gay, because it was the only. I just wanted to be right. All I ever wanted was a family and to get married and
mm-hmm.
Have kids and to do what the church told me I was supposed to do.
Mm-hmm.
But eventually, it got to a point where I couldn't be somebody I wasn't. And it hurt my feelings because I really felt like God had forgotten me, and it was like, how did you forget me? Like, all I want is, the same thing anybody else wants. I want somebody who's going to love me. I want a family. I wasn't out here trying to, in alleyways and backyards and stuff. I just wanted to be right. And, but what I realized was that God had not condemned me. The church had condemned me.
Mm-hmm. Society,
culture had condemned me. But the Bible is ambiguous at best around homosexuality. And if you really do the research, and I had to do the research for myself and look and see what the Bible really had to say about this, because I do believe in the Bible. I'm a Christian, for my heart. And I realized that I had been taught a lot of the wrong things, even at 16, exploring it. It was like, this is not what anybody's teaching me from this pulpit. They've been lying to me. And God does love me. And there is a place for me in the church. And there's a place for me in the kingdom. And I can be a Black, proud, gay, successful man. And I can be all of those things at the same time.
That's a deep proclamation, man. And we're going to talk a little bit more in depth about what that role plays in your career and has played in school and everything else a little later in the show. But the second question that ran through my mind out of the three before we even got to law school too as well is, how did your weight spiral out of control? Or were you like growing up, were you a little bit overweight growing up, or did it kind of spiral? Because nobody just goes and now you're 540 pounds. Like, how did it transform into getting 540 pounds at that time in your life?
So there was definitely, and sometimes I don't like to bring it up, but there was a history of abuse there for me. When I was younger, I was, kind of sexually assaulted by some other young boys. Because growing up, I was very thin, actually, when I was younger. Probably about 13 was when I started picking up weight. And it was around that time that I stopped playing with boys because I thought that all the boys would do to me what the other boys had done. And so I just avoided large groups of men because they made me uncomfortable because I didn't want to be put into another sexual situation. And so I stayed in the house and I stopped going outside to play and stopped involving myself in any kind of sports. I was never super good at sports anyway, but sports meant large groups of boys. And so I just avoided that altogether. And I started to eat. Eating was my comfort. I ate when I was happy. I ate when I was sad. It was a mood regulator. It was something to do when I was bored. And eventually, it just spiraled out of control. It became an escape for me in a lot of ways. And I became addicted to food.
Wow. And I can't wait. And like I said, we're going to discuss your journey back down because if people, when they see this online, they see your picture online, they're like, that doesn't 5'4", that doesn't even compute. But I just wanted to see how that got there. And my third question, and this question, I'm glad I've been able to ask this because I really haven't been able to ask this question to anybody on the show because there's been few that kind of could relate. But like I said, I've been homeless for a little while in my life. I've dealt with the traffic situations, riding with a dirty license for years and then having to finally get that out. And now we're in a much better place. But in my head, there's always some leftover scars and residue. And it's not like typical back. And even though, and this is my thoughts, I want to hear your thoughts on it, but I would say it's not kind of like everybody else's maybe typical baggage because when you're homeless, when you don't have any place to stay, it just, there's certain things that you have to, you go through, you see, and it sticks in your brain. And even when you are out of it, there's certain scars that you just have. And of course, it helps you be more relatable and transparent because you're not scared of your past because you're past that. But there are some things that you hang on to and it's a struggle at times to kind of just letting stuff go. So how do you deal with now? And like I said, maybe I'm getting ahead of myself, but now truly honoring your story, but also letting stuff go.
I think, I think you never really let it go. There's a song that says they say time heals all wounds. I don't agree. Every wound leaves a scar. They're all over me. And I think that that's very, very true. Like everything that has happened to you, you are a culmination of all the things that happened to you. And at some point, I just started to fall in love with the good and the bad. I wrap myself in my trials and my tribulations as much as I do my triumphs, because I think they all have come together to make me who I am. So I definitely think about those times when I was hungry and homeless and had nobody to call, and people said I would never be anything. My mother told me, she was like, when I graduated from law school, she was like, I never thought you'd be this. Like, I thought you'd work at JCPenney. She said, I thought you'd be okay, but I never thought you'd be this. And so that always, it sticks with you. But it also is the impetus that I use. I use that as fuel. I wrap that thing around me because I am never going back to that. I'm never going back to those hungry nights. I'm never going back to living in my car. I'm going to do everything I can do to make sure that I'm successful and I stay right here because I refuse.
Man,
I've been there. I've done that. I learned that lesson.
That's powerful. And a last question before we kind of get to the law school speech, because I got some pointed stuff I want to ask there is at the beginning in the quote, you talked about slaying dragons, right? What was the first dragon you had to slay or truth that you had to come to grips with when you made that decision at 28 at that bar, drenched at night saying, yo, this is at a birthday party that nobody else showed up to. After that night, I know you changed things around, but what was the first thing that you said I had to come to grips with to actually move on? And the reason why I asked is because I noticed somebody listening to this podcast that maybe they're a little bit older than usual. Maybe their life is just in a whole place where they don't want it to be. And they're lost. Like, what was that first dragon that you had to slay?
Oh, the very first dragon I had to slay, and the one I have to slay every day, is the realization that I did this. that I created this situation for myself, and I had to be an adult. And I don't take people off the hook. I don't think you can, I don't take the people who abuse me off the hook. I don't take, some, like some people are just predisposed genetically to being bigger like that. Yes, that happens. But I overate myself to 540 pounds. I was not, I didn't take control of my own academic and my own, educational success. I decided that I was going to speed all around the country and get those tickets. You know what I'm saying? Like I did that. I created those situations. There are consequences to those situations, and there's reasons that I made those decisions. But at some point, I had to begin to take ownership for what I could take ownership of and what I should take ownership of. And I don't get into the whole respectability politics and pulling yourself up by your bootstraps and all that stuff. I think that's crap. But when it's crap collectively when you look at us as a collective group of Black and brown people, because our situation has been, there's a lot of different reasons why we're in a situation as a collective: systemic racism, institutional racism, like preferences and prejudices and all those things that very much contribute to why we are collectively in a difficult situation. But when you are as an individual, you have to examine what the decisions that you are making personally and try to figure out how to get yourself out of that situation. And I had to start to point to the things that I have done in the situations I created, because otherwise I was going to continue to blame everyone else. And that's what I did up to that point. It was like, well, if they had done this better, then I would be this person. And, my parents didn't do this. So, that's why I'm here. And this person hurt me. So that's why I act like this. And all of that, like at some point, you just got to put the kibosh on it and be like, you know what? I broke it. I'll fix it. And even if I didn't break it, I'll fix it, because I can. And I have the power to be anything I want to be. It ain't what they call me. It's what I answer to. And what I believe myself to be.
Yeah, man. Love that, man. So as we do a brief transition to the law school space, man, we won't stay too long, but I think it's really important in your story. How did you build up that self-confidence tool to convince? And I'm framing this question this way, but the answer might not go the way it's framed. But what, like, the build up the self-confidence to not only say, okay, I'm gonna go to law school, but I'm gonna thrive in law school, because like you said, you just came from a situation that, of course, at 28, okay, now you took personal accountability. You started paying off debts, working more hours. And then now you went to Georgia Perimeter and then Georgia State, and now it's law school. But what gave you that confidence to say that? Because sometimes when you go through the dramatic situation, you can bounce back. But sometimes the bounce back, it takes a little while to get your confidence back up to where it was, right? Probably when you left high school, as far as academically and whatnot. So academically, what gave you that confidence to say, to tackle that challenge of law school?
So I will tell you, I got into this program. There was once I got to Georgia State and I started thinking about graduate school, I was deciding between an MBA and a JD. And I was looking for scholarships for minority students. And I came across this program called Trials. And it was a joint partnership between Advantage Testing, Harvard Law School, and NYU Law School. And it was taking place at Harvard. There was 2,000-3,000 applicants, and they were picking 20 people. And I was like, oh, there's just no way I'm ever going to get this. And I was like, but I'm going to apply. Let me see what happens. I applied for it, and they called. I had a Skype interview, and eventually I got it. And so I got into that program, and it changed my whole life. Arun Alagapan changed my life. He was the person who was running that program, and it took my LSAT score up 27 points from my first taking. We drilled for 6 weeks on this LSAT and he designed the program specifically because people of color generally are not well equipped for not only the LSAT but law school in general. We've been educated differently. Public schools are not educating kids the same way these private schools are educating young people, and generally that affects Black and brown kids. And so I would never have been able to go to Duke. I would have never been able to be who I am without that program, intervening and changing my perspective. I'll never forget, I was sitting outside Harvard Law School, and Dean Martha Minow came outside, and she said, "Hi, Seth." And I remember calling my mother I felt like Beyonce had said something. Like, I said, Mommy, the dean of Harvard Law School just said hi, Seth. She knows my name. It was just so meaningful. And trials gave me that actually, I would say, like, you can't be what you can't see. I didn't even know all the things I could be. I didn't know what the possibilities were for me. Even, I knew, like, lawyer in general, but I didn't know what that meant. I didn't know what it meant to go to a certain type of school versus another type of school, depending on the kind of work you can do. I had never heard of private equity. Like, I didn't even know what that was. And so being in that program and having people intervene and say, oh, no, Seth, you have possibilities. There are all kinds of things that you can do and be. Like, that was the thing that gave me the confidence to pursue this in a way that I had not pursued it up to that point.
Man, that's huge. And the program is called Trials?
It's called Trials. It's a program that's designed for minority students who are interested in law school. And I tell you, anybody who has a chance should apply. It changed my life. Every year it's either at NYU or it's at Harvard. It transfers year to year. But Arun and his team are changing young people's lives, and they're creating leaders, and they're putting people out here who are going to change the world, and saying, he has no need to do it. He has absolutely he doesn't have to do this. Like, he's a Harvard-trained lawyer himself. He has a very successful testing company that does very well, but he wants to give back, and he wants to create world changers. He wants to give Black and brown folks the chance to do something spectacular. And it's just, I can't say enough about it.
Man, everybody that's listening, the link to that will be in the show notes, so make sure you check that out if you're interested. So, on that note, when did you make the decision to transfer from Georgia State to Duke Law School, and what was the deciding factor to do that?
So, Georgia State, I got to Georgia State as a 1L. I applied to Harvard, I applied to a bunch of other schools, and I didn't get in, mostly because of my lackluster grades from Tuskegee and the University of Buffalo. I had, even though it had been kind of 10 years between Georgia State, my undergraduate career in Georgia and my undergraduate career previously, a lot of schools weren't willing to consider that. They just took my aggregate GPA, together. And then Georgia State Law School gave me a really nice scholarship. So I said, all right, I'm going to go here for a year, and I'm going to work really hard. I'd always had transferring on my mind. But I didn't know if I was going to be able to do it. And once I got into law school, it was hard. It was much, much harder than I thought it would be. But I remember being on, I was watching Bloomberg one day, and Arun, who ran Trials, was on a panel on Bloomberg, and they were introducing all the different people there. And it was like, such and such from Yale, such and such from Stanford, such and such from Duke, such and such from Harvard. And I was watching the show, and I was like, oh, if I stay here, I'll never get there. And that was the moment that I decided I had to transfer, because I knew I didn't just want to be a lawyer. I wanted to be the lawyer. I wanted to be an expert in my field. I wanted to be the person they call when there are emergencies around what I do. Like, I needed to set myself apart. And so I needed to go and get an education that would allow me to do that. And I was older, so I didn't have the time that maybe some of my other classmates had coming in at 23 or 24. You can build a career that speaks for itself. I was going to school in my 30s, so I needed doors to open immediately.
Got you. That's because I know some people listening like, what do you mean? You can do the same thing. It's like, hold up. In my situation, I'm 30. I didn't have 7-8 years to prove myself coming from like Georgia State. Like, you can do it, but it's a different ball game when you're a little older doing it rather than like when you're doing it 23. So I'm glad you said that. And for those that have never been to law school, everything, can you kind of describe for layman's term? Because I hear it all the time. People say, oh, law school is difficult. You're just reading all these books. But how would you describe law school to somebody specifically at Duke compared to Georgia State? No comparing, but just like your experience at Duke. How would you describe law school to people that have never been?
Well, I'll say, first of all, that Duke Law School was the best decision I've ever made. Duke Law absolutely changed my life. I feel like Duke Law needed me to come right at the time that I came here. We had so many situations and so many things that needed addressing at Duke. And thankfully, we had faculty and administrators who were not afraid to address those hard subjects and not afraid to engage in conversations particularly around things that affected minority students. So it was just, I can't say enough about what a hardcore dookie I am. But I think that law school, it was one of the most challenging things I ever experienced. I had never been stretched in that way. They asked you to think in a way that you're just not used to thinking. Mm-hmm. And I remember being, even in my 1L year, I finished my first semester, and I was on the phone with my best friend, and I was crying, and I was like, Lord, I said, I don't know what I'm doing. I said, I don't think I can do this. And he was like, you have met every challenge in your life, boy. Are you crazy? Go in there and talk to your professor and figure out how to fix this thing. And it gave me a kick in my butt, and I went into my professor, and me and her had a conversation. I remember she was like, all right, Mr. Pearson, sit down. I'm going to show you how to do this. I'm going to show you how to brief a case. I'm going to show you what I want when I test. I'm going to show you how to be successful as a law student. And she sat with me for 3 or 4 hours and went through how to brief a case and what she was looking for when she tested. And I tallied that course. I mean, I got the highest grade in contracts that semester out of everybody in that class, because she decided to take the time to sit with me and show me how to do this. So I really believe in like having professors that are going to sit down with you. And that was at Georgia State. And I found the same thing in my professors at Duke. They were willing to sit down and sit with me for hours at a time. Elizabeth DeFontenay, Jim Cox, they were just amazingly open and warm and willing to share their knowledge in a way that I'd never experienced. So it was, having going to a school that's going to support you, it's really, really important in choosing law schools, because law school is a challenge.
And with all that said, before we leave the law school space, how did you, or did your background story come up, or how did you embrace people and have those conversations? Because especially being at Duke, which is everybody that goes there is not the most wealthiest, but a lot of people are, right? And people come with that, anybody knows about Ivy League or private schools. It's definitely like, and Duke's not Ivy League, but it might as well be.
Ivy Plus.
I know, yeah. And then you come, and of course you earned your right there, you got it, but you do have a big backstory. And then you have younger colleagues, maybe come from privilege. So did you feel comfortable in that space? In the times that you didn't feel comfortable, what made you at ease?
So I think because I was older, I just walked in there and I was like, I don't care. My mother had always told us, she was like, you aren't better than anybody, but nobody is better than you. Ooh. And so I walked in there with that attitude, like, y'all can sit here and talk about all of the excursions that your family took and where y'all vacationed Lord, I can't even, in Ibiza or Santorini, and I went to Atlanta, for Christmas.
Charlotte.
Charlotte. Ain't got a stamp on my passport yet. But what I have is life experiences and things that have richly deepened my life. I can speak to things in a way that people who have had privilege can't speak to. I have life experiences that I wouldn't give up for anything in the world, that I think are just as valuable, I think more valuable than people who, been raised with that silver spoon in their mouth. And I don't take anything away from that, because you can't help how you were raised. If you were raised with money, but I'm going to have me some money, and my kids will have money too. So they'll have, they're going to have a different experience, but I'm going to ensure that my kids, have experiences that deeply, richly, fill their lives. So, and make sure that they're not so separated from how most people live, because most people are not wealthy. Most of us are not the 1%. That's why there's only 1% of them. So I think going into those spaces, you can feel intimidated. I didn't particularly feel intimidated, but there were definitely times when I was, you couldn't tell that they assumed that I didn't know as much as they did. You get into these group situations and you're the only brown face there. There's this assumption of incompetence immediately, that you haven't had the experience there. There's a dismissal of your ideas when you offer them. I definitely experienced that, but you have to fight your way back. And I was willing to do that, and I was equipped to do that because life had tried to beat me down, but I never let it win. And I sure wasn't going to let somebody that had grew up with a whole lot of money whoop on me if I didn't let life destroy me. I'm not going to let this person intimidate.
Yeah, man. So as we move on to past law school, what would you say was your top one to two takeaways from your law school experience in general, that whole chapter? Because I mean, you just, like I said, 4 or 5 years ago, you were just working at a call center at JCPenney's, and now you're in this intellectual environment, and it's challenging too. It's not like you just have to deal with like mental stuff. No, it is challenging. You are getting pushed farther than you ever have. So when you're done with that experience, before you took the bar, but you were graduated law school, like when you reflected, like what was it like?
So it was funny that you said. I had a mentor named Ed Snow. So I have a friend named Joshua Alston who was at a conference. He met this lawyer. I had no idea who the lawyer was, and was like, "Yeah, my friend is interested in the law." At the time, I was working in the call center, and Ed turned out to be one of the largest corporate partners in Atlanta. And Ed came up, and on my lunch break, when I was working at United Healthcare in the call center, came up and had lunch with me. We talked about law school and some of the possibilities. I wasn't anybody at that time. And this man was, making millions. He was a partner in Atlanta and took the time out to come and talk and have lunch with me. And we've had lunch every year from that point. So he's watched me, build my career. But having people like that, he's what I aspire to be when I talk about, being able to give back in the space that I'm in now. I have so many mentees and people that I mentor now because people like him, when I was nobody and nothing, were willing to come out and sit with me and have conversations and encourage me to do what I'm doing. But to your question, so the takeaways, from law school, I take away from the same thing I take away from most of my experiences is that I have the power to create anything I want in my life. That I am not limited by my past. I tell people, they told me I wasn't never going to be nothing, that I wouldn't be anybody. When I flunked out of school the first time, I came back home to my church, and this woman said, "I thought you were in school." I said, "Yeah, I left, but I'm going to go back." She said, "You won't go back." And walked away from me. And it hurt me so bad, and I resented it so much. And I promised myself that I was going to go back. I don't care what nobody has to say about me. And I take that with me today. I don't care what people say about me and what I've done and who I've been. None of that has anything to do with where I'm going and what I'll be. And so I really take a lot of strength from that. And also, I think just a sense of community, knowing and understanding that none of us do this by ourselves. I have a community of people from Georgia State, from Duke, from Syracuse, from DC, from Atlanta. Like, I have this incredible group of people, a family and friends who have supported me and lift me up and are there for me if I call them right now and say I'm in trouble. They are on their way. They are the reason I've been able to do the things that I've been able to do. So I did not do this by myself. I could never have done it by myself. You have to have people around you who are in your corner, who are encouraging you. I was very purposeful about the people that I put in my life. Everybody can't walk with you. Everybody won't journey with you till the end, but there are some folks, some good, solid people that you need to take a look. I remember I spent a long time trying to get people to pay attention to me that didn't want anything to do with me. And I wasn't paying attention to the people who really actually wanted my time and wanted to spend it with me and really loved me. And I think we can do that sometimes. We look at people who are over there and we want to be over there. And so we want to give them our attention. But there are some people right here next to you walking this journey with you, encouraging you. That's where you need to put your energy and your time. Like, those are the people that are going to walk with you. And so I try to walk that thing out in my life.
Man, that's powerful, and I have nothing to add on that, man. So, now you were done with law school. So how was the bar, man? Before we get into what you do now, how was that bar, man? How long did it take you to prepare for that, man? Like, how was that experience? Cause it's like, that's crazy. People graduate from law school, they're happy, and then you have a whole nother exam. It's like, damn, we got more.
It was the worst thing that's ever happened to me. I take that bar exam. I have never been that stressed. To think about the fact that you spent all this money, you took out all these loans, you spent all this time to get to this place. And if you do not pass this one exam, all of it is for nothing. Like, you might as well not go to law school because you're not going to work for no law firm. You know, you might be able to go and do something different. And to try to cram 3 years of an education into this one exam, it is just a monumental, crazy kind of haul. And I thank God for Duke and Georgia State for preparing me to be able to be successful in taking the bar. But it was a really rough road. And I didn't take a lot of bar classes. So I didn't take evidence. I didn't take Prim Pro. I didn't take any of the classes that were kind of bar courses that were electives because I knew I wanted to do corporate law. Mm-hmm. So I took the corporate law electives. I took private equity and hedge funds. I took things that, I took some classes at the business school. I took the things that I was interested in that I thought would make me successful in my career. And, some people would have truly strongly advised against doing that. It made a much, much more stressful time for the bar exam because I was being introduced to topics I had never heard of. I had no idea what hearsay was before I started studying for the bar. No, I didn't. I mean, I'd heard of it, but I had no idea what it was essentially. I had to learn those things to get ready for the bar exam on top of refreshing things that I had already, I had classes in before. Mm-hmm. So it was tough. It was a haul, man.
I bet. Well, I'm glad you passed that. So now we look to present day, as we look to our present day, man, as we begin to come to a close, man, we look to our present day and what you do in law. Because I know growing up and even to this day, honestly, we have this one picture of what a lawyer is, right? Law and order. You're sitting there and you're arguing, you're doing that. Then you see prominent lawyers that represent people on different clients. But I didn't realize until I got a little older that there was a lot, there was so many other things you could do in law. Like there's some people that didn't even practice law. So if you could describe what your role is and what you do in the current day, like what do you really do? Like what does it look like?
Absolutely. So I work in private equity, in the private equity venture capital group of my firm. We're actually now called Transactions. We've become a larger group that does some traditional M&A work, some public company works. I do most of my work on the private side with companies. I do a lot of startup work with entrepreneurs who are just beginning ventures, who are looking for their Series C, Series A financings. They're in the even in the convertible note round when they're really in the startup, have no money, but they have these amazing ideas. And I really love that work. I love working with entrepreneurs because they're so excited about what they do. And they're so excited about the ideas that they're bringing to the table. And to be able to watch them come to fruition and to become a trusted business advisor as that company grows and goes through its life cycle is something I'm really, really enjoying. And some of the companies that I started with, almost 3 years ago, are now really becoming flourishing companies. And they call me to this day. It's like, Seth, we're doing this and we're doing this, and I'm not sure, if this is a decision I should make, and what's the market out here, and to be able to advise them is awesome. I do a little bit of investment management work with hedge funds and private equity fund, with pitching funds for making alternative investments into hedge funds and private equity funds. And so we do some of the work on that end, which I also enjoy. It's been, that's awesome work. I was working on some really cool stuff around dementia and trying to do some. We had some clients that were doing some work to try to combat dementia. Mm-hmm. And to be able to, I do the paperwork around that stuff, but that kind of gives my life meaning. Like it gives my work meaning to be able to do things like that. Because somebody has to do it.
Yeah. So our question there is, because I've heard advising, I heard investment management and doing paperwork. Like, what does a lawyer have to do? Like, how does that play in? Because like I said, many of us, including myself, I know lawyers do other things, but when you're advising, are you advising from a legal perspective? When you like, how do you fit in? How do your experiences and your expertise as a lawyer fit into doing those tasks?
Yeah, so one of the things, a lot of entrepreneurs, I think, are hesitant to engage lawyers at the early stages of their, creating of their company. Mm-hmm. But there's a lot of things you want to consider when you're starting a company, a new company, and lawyers can help you to avoid mistakes that'll come later. A lot of my clients don't understand that nothing that you do matters when you have no money. And nobody cares what you do. You can give away all the equity in your company you want. You can do anything you want. You can violate all kind of securities laws when you have no money. What matters is when you get that first $1 million investment on this amazing idea, and everybody comes back to sue you. And the uncle of the friend that you gave 2% of your company to when you first started, now 6 years later comes back and says, he wants to cash in on this stock that he owns in your company, and he wants $6 million for something because he gave you 2 neckties and you gave him 2% of your company. I think what lawyers do is really help companies avoid pitfalls that will happen later on when they become successful. So you want to make sure that your paperwork is all in line, and that the contracts that you're signing and that you're issuing to people and engaging in are all on the up and up. And because when you do, it's not if you will be sued when you become successful, it's when you will be sued. Like, you will be sued if you are a successful business. And so engaging attorneys like myself early on in the early stages of the business, though it can be expensive, it's just a smart business.
Yeah, smart investment. And speaking of smart investments, you've done over the last couple years, man, invested a lot in your personal health and as far as with your weight management and order. So could you tell the audience, if you mind saying, what your weight is now?
Mm-hmm. Sure. So I am around 255, 260. I waffle in between there. I'm trying to get down to 220. That's the goal. But yeah, I started at 540 at my largest.
So how in the world? I know that's a podcast in itself, but we don't have we may get you where we have to do something. I don't even know how you could tackle that. But for our audience members right there, like, how did you lose 300 pounds?
Yes, so it was definitely a journey.
a journey. That's like 3 lifetimes. Like, most people lose 60, 100, but 300. That's like 3. Seriously, that's like maybe 3 to 6 lifetimes of losing weight, man. So, like, where do you even start?
Oh, it was I remember one of the reasons I did it. I'd gone to the BET Hip Hop Awards.
Uh-huh.
And it was at the Civic Center in Atlanta, and I was sitting there. The seats were really, really tight. And not only was I 540 pounds, I was 6'3". Uh-huh. So I'm this huge hulking person. I can hear the people behind me complaining that they can't see because I'm literally like it's blocking their view. And then it was not a live broadcast, but they were taping, so you couldn't move. So I had to sit there for 3.5 hours. And so when finally let us get up, I could feel that the sides of my pants were wet, and I didn't realize that the seats had dug into my thighs, and I had been bleeding from my thighs for 3.5 hours.
Are you serious?
Until the pants had stuck, the blood had dried to my sides, and I was in so much pain I had to pretend like it wasn't happening because I was with my friends and I was embarrassed. And I said, okay, I have to go. And I remember I walked out of the Civic Center, and someone was driving by in the car and yelled out of the car window, "You fat as F." And it was just like, it just added insult to injury for me. And what hurt me more than anything was that my friends all pretended like they didn't hear it because they were embarrassed too. And it just was like, not only am I embarrassing myself, I'm embarrassing my friends, and I have to make a change. So I went to the doctor, and because this was just a demon I couldn't beat. I had beat almost everything else in my life. At this time I was looking at law school. I worked in the White House for the President of the United States, the first Black president, the real one, not this new one. So I'd been able to, and meet the First Lady, was also a big impetus for me. I like meeting her, and the Let's Move campaign was so, inspiring to me. It was like, I've got to do something about my weight. And my doctor said, he was like, Seth, you got to forgive yourself. You got to stop blaming yourself. He said, he put my stomach on the screen. He said, most people's stomachs are the size of a fist. It's like, Seth, your stomach is the size of a football. You are hungry all the time. And he said, you will be hungry all the time. You will never be able to beat this until we go and do something about it. And you're going to end up 700 pounds if you don't do something. So I had gastric sleeve surgery in 2013. And so they took out 80% of my stomach, and they left me with 20%, which was about the size of my esophagus. Mm-hmm. And so that was my tool. And my doctor said, he said, this is a tool, Seth. You will get fat again if you do not use this as a tool. And probably a week after my surgery, I started to walk. And I went from walking to running, and then I started going to the gym. And I started going to the gym every day. And it became my place. And I think it also became a very communal place for me. And as I started to lose the weight, people would see me, and guys would come up and be like, encouraging me and like, come on, man, I see you out here, keep on pushing, doing your thing. And I started making friends who worked out together, and I worked out with them. And, a lot of my friends were very fitness oriented. And so it became a place that felt good and strong and like a community. Mm-hmm. And that was really, really important to me. And it's gotten me to the place in my fitness where I am today.
Man, that's huge. That's huge on so many different levels, man. And it's crazy now as we begin to come to a close. When I think about your story from where you started, the trials and tribulations of even law school, the stuff that you had to deal with as far as with your weight, with your life situation, as well as during this whole time, you're still a black male. So you're dealing with that stuff too in all these spaces, as well as the challenge, not a challenge, but as well as also being gay this whole time as well, and the stuff the different stuff that comes with that. So when you think about diversity now, and that's why I'm glad we're having the show, when you think about diversity, what does it mean to you, and how have you been able to, and I guess the bigger question is, how do you balance the role of being a leader, maintaining a positive career trajectory, but also standing for what you stand for? So not letting stuff slide, because once you start letting stuff slide, it may not hurt you because you've been through enough, you're mature, boom. But those behind you, that other 23-year-old that's struggling with something inside, and they're trying to do all this other stuff. So that's why I believe that you're one of the biggest advocates. They're having all these awards, having these leadership stake, and really having some skin in the game, not hiding who you are, but being transparent and really advocating. So how do you even deal with all that, man? Because it seems like you really, it's a lot it's a lot that you have to bear.
Mm-hmm. It is. It's a heavy weight, but I always say, like, I think that God gives you these things for you to deal with because He knows you can handle them. Mm-hmm. And everything that happens to you is for somebody else. Every blessing you get is supposed to pass through your hands into the next person's hands. And so my whole life is dedicated to making sure that whoever comes behind me has a softer landing than I had when I got here. I may not ever meet those people, but I have to plant these seeds. I have to create a space for little boys and little girls, little black and brown folks who look like me, who want to get to where I'm going. I need to create paths for them, because you can open a door across town, but if you don't create a path to get to that door, that's not equality. That's not access. So you have to create access to those places. And I grew up, as a black gay boy, not seeing anyone like me, not seeing relationships, successful black gay relationships, not seeing people support black gay love in any spaces at all, not seeing myself represented anywhere, not believing that I could ever be happy, that I could ever have a family, that I could ever have children, that I could ever have anything, being tolerated and not celebrated. I lived like that, and I refuse to not advocate for people who are coming behind me not to have that experience. And so I am a black man, so I fight for black and brown folks all over the place, because injustice, it's not just about what happens at the intersection. Because I'm a gay man, but I'm also a black man, and so all the things that affect people, black folks, black and brown folks, affects me too. And so I advocate for those things. I'm on the front lines, and I do the demonstrations. And I'm out at these protests, and I scream, and I bring my whole self to work. I'm unapologetically black. I bring all of that with me to this job. I live in Boston, where there are literally, there's like 2 of us. There are 8. There are seriously 8 black partners in this entire city.
Wow.
Like not 8%, 8 black partners here. And so I have to be a representative. I have to be a real representative for folks that look like me, and I have to be an advocate for folks that look like me. And I have to also be an advocate for people who love like me. And because we are underrepresented as well. And so it's a heavy burden to have to bear, but I will bear it. And I will bear it for people that come behind me who I may never, ever meet. Because that's my responsibility, because somebody did it for me. Because Bayard Rustin did it for me. Because James Baldwin did it for me. Because Langston Hughes did it for me. Because, everybody did it for me. Because Martin Luther King did it for me. Because Malcolm X did it for me. Ruth Jefferson did it for me. Like people came in front of me. Folks got sprayed with hoses and dogs set on them. So I could have the right to vote, so I have the right to be here. I would say one of the most powerful things that ever happened to me. I was in OCI, which is our on-campus interviews, and I was interviewing with a firm, and they had the bio of the lawyer that I was going to be interviewing with on the door. And so I was reading through his bio, and the deals that he had just recently done was like this $4 billion deal for Bristol Myers Squibb. And I was reading through, and I sat up there. I was sitting outside waiting for this interview, and I started to cry because my grandmother, my big mama, my great grandmother, whose name was Idelia Lee, who was the daughter of a sharecropper, her most prized possession was this plaque that she had gotten for 20 years of service working for Bristol Myers Squibb. But my big mama worked for Bristol Myers Squibb as a janitor. And so she swept up after those white men, because at the time it was just white men, who worked in that office. And so it wasn't because it was the only thing she could do, because Big Mama was incredibly intelligent. It was the only thing that she was allowed to do, was to let her sweep up after these men and to be standing as her great-grandson about to walk into this room and interview for a position with someone who had just did a $4 billion deal with this company, where I could have been sitting on the other side of that. I just can't imagine what my big mama would be feeling, knowing that this had happened, knowing that because she swept up for me, I get to come and walk in this room and have a conversation about getting a job with this man who had just done this $1 billion deal. I just think, I know that this is not how my life had to turn out. It didn't have to be this way. So every single thing that I have is a blessing. And so I work for those folks that are going to come behind me, and I do whatever I can to make sure that they're going to have the kind of landing that my big mama allowed me to have.
Wow, that's a powerful, powerful story to kind of, now that I'm thinking of that snapshot of and the footsteps that you're walking on, and also the footsteps that you are, or the trail that you're creating for the future, man. And before we get into our future round and then our last Culture Chain rapid fire round, I did want to ask one question. In regards, and in the state of America right now, there's a lot of stuff going on, and for a variety of different people, for people that are dealing with poverty, for black and brown folk, for Latino folk, for people that are coming in. It's just a lot going on. But specifically let's talk about African American culture. A lot of times there's always a charge for us to be united, to act as one, and to be tight and all that good stuff. But then we think about our black males, and we think about the relationships or the lack of relationships and working together with black males, but also black males that maybe that are gay. And I think there's a huge, I wouldn't say, I don't know if it's a divide, as a gap, but they're just, we don't know. And even myself growing up, I know my parents grew up in an age where they I don't know, I don't know the exact history of it, but I don't think as many people were out back in the day. And my parents, so my parents, me growing up, I was taught a lot of things. So when I got into college or high school or even as a young adult, I found it kind of hard to be comfortable in certain spots with people that look like me, went to work, but are homosexual. And the bias wasn't coming from me. It was coming from stuff that I heard back in the day. So I say all this to say, like, what can we do, or what would you suggest what would you like to see happen? It doesn't have to be like some big program, but as far as building like, I don't even know if say building relationships, but just like strengthening this as a black culture, specifically our black males. How do you think we can kind of start bridging that gap? Because there's so much that is we've learned that is wrong, and there's no way we're all gonna move on one accord if we're not all together in some capacity.
What's interesting, I think you really hit a nail on the head. What's always interesting to me is how people don't recognize the intentional way in which minority groups are dissected and forced to create these divisions. Mm-hmm. And we are much weaker when we are divided than we are together. I've always said that poor white people and minorities realized that most of their interests aligned, you would change the world. You would create a revolution. But as long as they continue to keep this divide between poor white folks and minorities, they can control both of us because we can never come together. And the same thing will happen in the black community. You have, LGBTQ people who are leading the charge on so many civil rights issues that have nothing to do specifically with being LGBTQ. But you look at Black Lives Matter, that was started by queer women of color. You look at many of our leaders, historically, James Baldwin and Elaine Locks, these were queer men of color. Like, these were, queer folks have been putting ourselves on the front lines for black folks for a very, very long time, and then being disrespected by that same community and being ostracized by that same community because of the misinterpretation of scripture that has said to these folks that we are dirty and that we are gross and that we're not worthy of the same kind of considerations that they're considered. But it's an intentional way to divide our community, and it's a way that makes us weaker. So I think we have to start having real conversations about homosexuality, about lesbianism, about trans, people. Having conversations creates an understanding in ways that are just unbelievable and powerful. And so creating forums in which you can have these real conversations about what it means to be a black gay man in this country, and what it means and how straight heterosexual men feel in relationship with homosexual men, and why there's this discomfort, and where does that discomfort come from, and is that a real thing, or is that something you've just learned your whole life? Ron, like you said, you've had these experiences that tell you that something is wrong. You don't know anything about it, and you do the same thing. We do the same thing that a lot of folks do to Muslim people. Like, you have no idea about the Muslim faith. You don't know what Muslim people study, but you have imputed on this entire group of people this idea that you have about who they are because you've never had a real conversation with them. And I will say, if you're uncomfortable with gay men, it's because you have never had a conversation with a gay man. Like, you don't really understand what it is to be me in America, and the kind of issues that I face on a daily basis. From my own community, from outside of my community, sitting at this intersection is a very difficult place where you feel like as a black gay man, you have no place in the black community. As a black gay man, you have no place in the gay community, because that's the white gay men are probably one of the most racist riddled communities that you would ever experience. And that's just a matter of fact. There is very few spaces for people of color in traditionally gay spaces. So you sit at this intersection where you feel like you don't belong anywhere, and that's a really, really hard place to be. Not to even mention what it must be like to be a trans person, particularly a trans woman of color, like to wake up and feel like you are in the wrong body your entire life. I can't imagine what that must feel like. I don't have that struggle. I don't understand that struggle, but I've had to sit down and talk to sisters of color that are experiencing these things, so I can get an understanding, so I understand where people are coming from. And there's just some compassion and kindness that goes into that. So I think if we start to treat people with compassion, with kindness, understand that we're walking in with our own prejudices and things that we've been taught, but we really don't know until you have a conversation with somebody what their life experiences are.
You said so much there, and I know this podcast is just a small step in the right direction, but I definitely hope, and I know that you will definitely over the next couple of years be a champion in certain, because there's other things, there's so much more that can happen. I think what you said was just spot on. It doesn't need to be a crazy big initiative or whatnot, but I think it just starts with beginning to open the molds of that communication and not just be something that backdoor is discussed or discussed among people of the same minds. Something that you could just say. And I think that's just like when we, just some other day, or I think, well, I don't know what we was talking about. Somewhere in church, they're talking about, dealing with homeless people and how many times we give money, but we never really understand or hear their story or talk to them. And the same things in so many different other situations. And that's how you could really build that empathy piece rather than just having fake empathy or all these things, whatever. So I hopefully this is like a step in the right direction, but I think there's so much more steps to be had because like I said, specifically when I taught and I saw students that struggled and I saw the apathy from, especially if we're talking about Title I schools and schools that go through like the amount of disrespect and the stuff that I've seen. I can only imagine how it's hard to even go through school. And then with dealing with parents and whatnot. So that's why I really am encouraged that not only you coming on the show, but the work that you are doing, because it has huge implications for the future. And because, you listen to music and whatnot, even if you see on TV now that I'm starting to learn more about bias. And now that when I watch like regular sports shows or anything else, it's like, dang, man, there's so much bias going on. And I know
and you have these kids, you have kids out who are really killing themselves. Like committing suicide because they think they're dirty and filthy and that no one will ever love them because they happen to be gay. But I think there has to be a call for our brothers and sisters to represent us in the same way we represent you. As queer people of color have stood on the front lines for all of us, for all people of color, in so many situations, we do have an expectation that our heterosexual brothers and sisters will stand up for us when we're not in the room. And y'all are in the locker room and they talking about us and they dogging us and they calling us, fag this and fag that somebody will stand up and be like, yo, brothers, y'all are wrong. And you need to have a real conversation with these brothers and sisters to really understand how they're walking and how they're moving. Because they'll say things to you when you're in the room that they would never say when I'm as an out black man. In the same way that we challenge our white, Caucasian brothers and sisters that when we're not in the room to speak up for us. The same way we challenge men to have conversations in the room when they're talking about women to speak up for women. You have to have, advocates and allies who are in these spaces when y'all are having real, private conversations that are going to speak up for us because we can't speak in places where we can't speak up for ourselves. And that's why I think advocacy and allyship is so, so important, because otherwise you'll never be able to root out that thing, because you're not going to talk to white folks. They're not going to talk the same way with black people in the room that they are going to talk when there's only white people in the room. And if none of the white people who feel differently will not speak up for us, then nothing is going to change.
Last question on this. So when you speak of allyship, is there a organized way, or is it more so just in your own collective spaces being an ally? Like is there programs or there's opportunities to be ally? Like what does that look like, or is it multifaceted?
Yeah, there's lots of ways that you can become an ally. Like there's formal ways. There's in almost every organization, if you work for a corporation, there are affinity groups, and you can join any of the LGBTQ groups as an ally. White people could join Black affinity groups as an ally. Those spaces generally are dedicated to people who are a part of those groups to have a kind of a normative experience in a place where they can have a collegial experience for people who have similar experiences, but a lot of them have ways in which you can join those groups as an ally. And then you can, like I said, just be a representative in spaces that we are not. When you sit in a barbershop and they start talking about, dogging out, queer people, like somebody can speak up and let them know that it's wrong. When they start talking about women and doing, speaking derogatorily about women, men need to stand up and say that this is wrong and this is not the kind of conversation that you have as a man. I challenge people to be allies, to be in private the same person you are in public. Like when nobody is watching, be a hero. Fight the battle that you can't win. I always say that heroes are people who fight battles that they know they cannot win. We fight poverty. We know poor will always be among us, but that does not mean we don't fight poverty. We know that racism will always be with us because the original sins of this country, but it doesn't mean we don't fight racism just because we'll never get rid of it. We continue to fight this thing. We fight homophobia. We fight transphobia. We fight Islamophobia. We fight misogyny. We fight all of these things despite knowing that it will always be with us because you have to fight if you're going to be a hero.
Be a hero in the dark. That's powerful, man. That's the boom. That's the title of this podcast, man. So as we read, that's powerful. Be a hero in the dark. You said, man, I'm not even gonna add anything to that, man. So before our coach change round, we always ask this last question about the future. When it's all said and done, how do you want to be remembered, man?
I want to be one of the good guys. I want to be somebody when everything is over and I close my eyes. I want folks to say Seth tried to do his best. Seth did the best he could to leave this place a little bit better than he got it. And that was a good brother, and he is gone, and we will miss him.
Love that, man. Love that. So our culture change round is a series of 5 rapid fire questions. We get back rapid fire answers, and we close up the show, man. You ready to rock?
I'm ready to rock.
What is the best piece of advice that you have never received?
Never received. Nobody told me what I could have been. I wish somebody had told me when I was young what I could have been. It would have changed the trajectory of my life.
Love that. So there's food for thought for all my people out there to have. And it's not just contact. And I think one thing critical that you said during the podcast, I didn't get a chance to double back on, is that when you did have the meeting with the older gentleman, when you had the call center, it wasn't like you were 18 or 15. You were a grown man. And I think it's a challenge for us as listeners to tell some of our friends that maybe struggling what they could be. Not just because you don't have to do that just to kids. Even it is not an age marker on that.
No. And I think that there's a lot of energy that is directed towards young people, and it should be. I take absolutely nothing away from that. The young people are our future. But just because you're 27, 28, 35 does not mean your life is over. Just because you're 40, you can change everything today. You can become a different person and live the next part of your life in triumph, in joy, regardless of what has happened before. Don't think that your time is up. It ain't over until it's over.
Love that, man. Look at Seth been giving life the whole podcast, boy. Good go. If you could add one habit and take away one habit, what would they be?
I take away French fries. Lord, if I could just get rid of French fries, I could change my life. And probably, adding just another level of discipline. I get very easily distracted if all the yarn roll by and I'm gone for an hour. So just being able to add, a little bit more focus and discipline and attention, I think would be awesome. I'm president of the world.
What is a favorite book that you have read over the last year and why?
I'm in the process right now of reading The New Jim Crow by Michelle Alexander, which is absolutely changing my life. There's a young man named Adam Foss. I was listening to him talk on the Nantucket Project, and he said, so go out there and read The New Jim Crow. So I started reading that, and it's a life changer.
Oh yeah, I've read that a couple of times, and man, I got to read it again because it's so much in there.
So much going on in there.
Yeah, so I try to sneak it. I was in Starbucks. Where was it? Barnes and Nobles, and I read it while in Barnes and Noble. I didn't want to take it home. I was like, dang, I gotta go get the regular one and get a supporting project. So I was speed reading.
Absolutely.
What is your biggest fear?
My biggest fear is that I won't matter. That when I leave here, it won't matter. It won't matter to anyone.
Wow. And if you were the president of the United States, what is the first thing you would do?
This one?
Yeah.
Oh gosh, the president of the United States. I would definitely probably focus on the mass incarceration issue that we have in this country. Like, I think it's one of the things that has affected particularly this community. To have, a prison population where 50% of those are African Americans in a society where 13% of us are African American is just a tragedy, and it's disgusting, and the wealth disparities in this country are just insane. Mass incarceration, I think, is one of the biggest issues facing us today.
Wow. See, that wraps up that round. And everybody that comes on this show, I call a culture change agent, man, because they're changing the culture in their own specific way. And then our last question we always ask every single guest has ever been on this show through going on 100 episodes is, if you could change one thing about society, most specifically our African American culture, what would it be and why?
That's deep. What would I change about African American culture? That's really, really hard to say, because I am so in love with my Blackness. I'm so in love with my people and how we have been able to persevere and overcome. Mm-hmm. And like every obstacle it seems like we face, we have been able to push past. One of the things I might change is our ability, is a little bit of our apathy. And I think one of the biggest things that they've been able to do is convince us that the struggle is over and that there's nothing to fight against. We still have a fight. We still need to have our feet to the fire. We still need to be pushing forward this needle, because there's so much work to be done for our community. There's so much more that we have to do, and we have to create leaders in this community in a way that we've done in the past. Like, we don't have Martin Luther King, we don't have Malcolm X's anymore. They're there, but we don't have the kind of national reach, which is so surprising in an era of social media, that we're not seeing, people come forward in the way that we have in the past. But in some ways that's not fair, because you have the Angela Rice, you have this Simone Sanders, you have people, Keith Boykin and Vaughn Jones, and a lot of these political pundits who are really out here in the media representing us really, really well. But I think we need some strong leadership. We need some strong Black leadership in this country who are going to pull us together as a community, show us what we need to fight for, and show us how to fight it.
That's a wrap, man. I think you said it. You said so many things on this podcast that I think can relate to a wide range of audience, from people that are aspiring to change career paths, people that are maybe are students that left school that are trying to get back, people that are changing careers, people that are older in their careers and but they still kind of are looking for more hope, man. I think you've touched a variety of different aspects of your life. You shared a lot. I know if we had more time, you would share, you have so much other stuff that we couldn't even touch on, man. So from the bottom of my heart, man, I want to thank you for giving well over an hour of your time, man, to share your story, to be honest, and just give us a side that of yourself that everybody doesn't see, but also the world doesn't see, man, which is why this podcast is so powerful, man. So I just want to say thank you, man.
I appreciate you, brother. I appreciate what you're trying to do for the culture. I appreciate you doing what you can to move this thing forward. We need more folks like you out here who are going to be visible, who are out here trying to do some things, and I'm excited to see where this podcast goes.
No doubt, man. So for anybody that wants to stay in contact or keep in touch or find out more about what you do, or where can they find you right online?
You can always, if you go to the Folding Lardner website, you can easily find me there. Friend me on Facebook, Seth Pearson. I'm on Instagram, Seth5105. Happy to talk to anybody about anything, anytime, anywhere.
All right, so Minority Trailblazer Nation, all that information will be on the show notes. So as we always do, I need y'all to do two things, and two things only. One, make sure you leave a review, and number two, change the freaking culture. Good night.